Welcome to this video series about improvising by Sietze de Vries. You can support this video series by donating the amount of your choice to Sietze de Vries' Patreon account, which can be found by searching Sietze de Vries Patreon or by finding the link in the description below the video. Enjoy the video.
So, for this lesson, we are in the dome-shaped church of Veenhuizen, a beautiful little village about 20 kilometers south of the city of Groningen. It's actually in the province underneath Groningen. It's called Drenthe. And you can see it's a real wonderful building with wonderful acoustics as well. And this organ is built by the organ builder Hillebrand, not the famous German Hillebrand, but organ builder that worked in the Netherlands, in the north of the Netherlands. And he made this organ as a one manual instrument in 1821. And the rugpositief was actually just for show. And as you can still see, it's very shallow, the rugpositief case. So you couldn't imagine that any stops would fit in. But if we come closer, then we'll see that there are actually some stops in the rugpositief now. The organ was restored by Bernhard Etzkes, and well, he kind of took the challenge of seeing if he could place some stops in the rugpositief. And in the end, maybe you can see it on top of the rugpositief, you can see 5 little levers, and that means the instrument has a second manual now, a rugpositief with 5 stops, which is quite special. And as you can see, the whole organ case is really beautiful. And although it was not built for this church, it's actually moved from a church in Friesland, in Akrum, but it fits here really well, and like I said, with a wonderful acoustics, it's quite a remarkable little gem. So let's go to the manuals and start our lesson. I'll put you on the rugpositief and hopefully you'll be able to see most of what I do. And as you can see, for a giant like me, this is really tiny, the whole space between Hauptwerk and rugpositief. But I really don't mind, because the instrument is so beautiful that you forget all about it after a while. Well, today I want to talk a little bit more with you about harmonizing, because we already discovered that harmonizing is the main thing when you want to start improvising. It's like the ABC, the start of speaking a language. And the better you can harmonize, the better you can improvise. So we talked a lot about 1, 4, 5, so the main key, the subdominant and the dominant key. Today I also want to talk a little bit more about the relative minor or major, because once you understand how the keys are always related and you can shift pretty fast from one key to another, you'll discover that your options for improvising really improve a lot. Alright, so let's go for a beautiful hymn tune first. For today I chose the German hymn Herr Jesu Christ, dich, wend. And of course we know that very well if you play organ, because Bach and Georg Böhm made beautiful choral preludes on that hymn tune. First I will play it in F major. That means we have the F as the main key, the B flat as 4 and the C as 5. and you probably discovered already that I didn't use only 1, 4, 5 in root position, because that's impossible in this melody. Already in the first line it starts modulating to a different key. And you can see the B flat is replaced by B natural, and that gives it away. We are actually going to the dominant key, to C major. And the trick is here, to get to the new key, you have to shift somewhere in the first line from thinking in F major to thinking in C major. So what you can do, for example, is you start in F major. But then the next chord, you don't think as a 1 in F major, but as a 4 in C major, and then we can do the cadence 4, 5, 1. But since that 4, 5 is a quite ugly parallel, I play the same chord just one note up. You can avoid that by using inversions. And remember, inversions are not about what you do with the right hand to invert the triads, it's all about the left hand, the bass note you are playing. So instead of playing in the bass the cadence F, G, C, instead of the G I play a D, which is also part of the triad of G, of course. So then we get something like. And still that's not the best sound. To even improve it more, you can change this chord, the G major chord, into a dominant 7 chord. So I add F. And actually that chord is just a normal 5, so in this case we are in C major, so a G major chord with an F added. Of course a very famous chord, you hear it all the time. And now when I do the trick with the inversion, you get this. And that's of course much more beautiful. And those inversions are actually quite important. The more you get the hang of it, you will discover that your voicing, so how one voice goes from one key to another, you should do it as beautiful as possible. And what we did until now was, I always call it the fire department truck, because we go all the time. It's like a siren, and it's not really beautiful. And of course you have more options, because you can always use another note from the triad you are playing, and that just means that you use an inversion in your bass note. So in the middle you can do it as well. So instead of a C, I played an E. But actually that E is not that important in the chord, so if I double it here as well, it's not beautiful, so I doubled the C here instead of the E. And that's what you call good voicing. And voicing is really important when you improvise and compose, because it will bring out the most beautiful sound that you're looking for. But it's actually quite complex, because the more you work with inversions and different voicing, the less clear it is what triad you are playing. So that's why it's important to stick as long as possible to simple triads, really close together. And the more you feel confident, like, okay, I can do an inversion or I can do better voicing, then you try it. And only when you feel confident that you can do it, then you start doing it more and more. But for now, let's just work with it a little bit more, because the first line you can end in C major. That's the most obvious choice. But you can actually use different combinations, because now we are in C major, and C major has of course different keys that are related. So for example, the minor relative key of C major is A minor, and a relative key means that it has the same accidentals, so in this case no sharps, no flats, but instead of the major key it's the minor key, and they're always minor third apart. So that means C major is also connected to A minor. And now you can really do beautiful things, because if you can shift in your mind from F major to A minor, which is still a pretty obvious choice, it's still very close, they're all relatives from each other, so to speak, all the keys, then you can do a first line that sounds like this. A really beautiful sound, and what I actually did was just a 5-1, but now in A minor, and that means I need an E, and of course when you don't have any accidentals, normally you would play this, which is fine too, but you probably discovered, and you just discover it by ear, that the G sharp is more beautiful here. And that's kind of a rule when you are in a minor key and you play the cadence 5-1, you can make the 5 major instead of minor all the time. You don't have to do it, but it's a choice that you have. So now we have some interesting options. When I harmonize the whole melody now and I use some of these ideas, you can end up with something like this. And in the last line, these beautiful chords, is the same trick again, because this is, I was thinking in D minor, and D minor is of course the relative minor key of F major, the main key here. So I can play 5-1 in D minor, and again I use not the normal 5 but the 5-7, so the dominant 7 chord. And the next step was that I didn't play it in root position, but again I used an inversion. So instead of the A, D in the bass, I played the C sharp D. And then I left the C sharp out here again because of the voicing. So you can actually see how important it is to know your music theory, because the more you know about different keys, which accidentals belong to a certain key, and the faster you can shift from one key to another, so that you immediately know, okay, I'm in F major, so F is 1, B flat is 4, C is 5, and now I shift to D minor, so D is 1, G is 4, A is 5. That you can do that really fast during playing, the better your harmonizing gets, of course, because you have more beautiful options. Alright, last time we made a beautiful choral prelude, so let's do the same thing on this hymn tune. But now I'm going to use some of those chords I just played. So some inversions, some dominant 7 chords, some shifting to different keys, not only sticking in F major, but also using keys as C major, the dominant, but also the relative minor of C major, A minor, the relative minor of F major, D minor, and then you can really have interesting options to make the choral prelude really beautiful. So let's see what happens. I'm using the beautiful principle 8 that you already heard in the facade of the Hauptwerk, and in the root positive I will have the sesquialtera. And I actually did a few more things. One of the things was I used suspensions, and suspensions are actually quite easy to use. The thing you do, and especially when you have repeated chords like we have all the time, you just add a dissonant sound. So instead of going directly from 1 to the normal 5, I can, for example, have this dissonant, and that resolves into the right note, of course. And I can find them in many places, so that's a trick you can use to make sounds more interesting, because you get some tension because of the dissonant sound, and then it resolves. And that's actually very pleasant to listen to, because if you hear the chords all the time exactly like you expect them, then a piece can be quite boring. And the other thing I did, I not only used 1, 4, 5 in different keys, but occasionally I used a 6, a 2, a 3. And remember, we've talked about it before, those are really not difficult chords, but you have to imagine that they are really related as well. So if you are in F major, 1, 4, 5 is like we've seen, F major, B flat major, C major. But in the relative minor key, D minor, the same 1, 4, 5 would be D minor, G minor, A minor. And those are exactly the 2, the 3 and the 6 that we didn't use in F major. So in F major you have these chords. In D minor. And you actually end up, if you put them all together, with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the 7, as we've talked about before, you don't use because that's a diminished chord. Which is, by the way, also beautiful. We will talk about that later. You can use it in many ways also to go to different keys, for example. Alright, so let's do one more version of this song, and now I will use different keys. Because you probably discovered when I was playing, to end the first line in C major would be the normal thing to do, because you start in the main key, then you go to the dominant, and at a later stage you can go to minor keys or more far away keys. I can do a different order now and just try to copy it at home, and then maybe choose another hymn and try to do the same thing. It's all about practicing these things a lot, and that you combine the knowledge of your theory, that you really know in what key you are and which strides you can use. You combine that with using the hymns and finding beautiful harmonizations. So let's do it once more, and now for good fun I will add the tremulant of the organ as well.